So I was having coffee with my friend Elaine the other day. He's 62, right? Newly divorced.
Wow.
And his kids, they finally talked him into trying a dating app.
Oh, boy. How's that going?
Well, he was scrolling through it, looking, half amused, half completely horrified, honestly. And then he just stops scrolling, hands me his phone, doesn't say a word.
Okay.
And on the screen is this profile, someone probably in their late 20s. And the bio, it says something like, solo, poly, demisexual, my pronouns are ilfe, looking for a metamor who enjoys kitchen table vibes, no situationships.
Wow. Okay. That's quite a list.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Elaine looks at me totally deadpan, and he just goes, I feel like I need a university degree and a translator just to ask someone for a drink.
I can absolutely see that, yeah.
He said, back in my day, you were either available or not available. That was it. Now, he says, it feels like you need to submit a 10-page thesis on your relational architecture.
Relational architecture. That's actually a pretty good way to put it.
Yeah, but he wasn't, angry about it. He was just genuinely bewildered. Like he'd woken up in a country where he didn't speak the language anymore.
That feeling of, linguistic alienation.
Yeah.
Where the rules you thought you knew for connection, for intimacy, they've just been completely rewritten.
Exactly. And it wasn't judgment. It was more this fear, a real fear of getting it wrong, of accidentally offending someone just because he literally doesn't have the new dictionary.
That feeling is such a perfect encapsulation, really, of this moment we're in. It's way beyond just dating trends, isn't it?
It seems like it.
It's this huge cultural shift. People are using language now to define their desires, their identities, their relationship structures with this incredible specificity that we haven't really seen before.
So Elaine's profile shock, it's kind of the perfect way into this whole topic. It really captures that challenge, right? Trying to connect across generations or just different frameworks.
Absolutely. So our mission today in this deep dive is basically to give you that new dictionary. Let's unpack this relational architecture that these terms describe.
Okay.
And crucially, we need to understand why these terms even became necessary. What's the driving force?
Right. What problem are they solving?
Well, we have to explore this central tension. You've got this rapid, very deliberate evolution of identity, of relationship models.
Like the stuff Elaine saw.
Yeah, exactly. And that's running right up against these very traditional, very ingrained, mononormative, assuming monogamy is the only way, and fundamentally binary social structures and legal structures too.
So the language isn't meant to make things more complicated.
No, quite the opposite, I think. These terms aren't designed to create complexity for its own sake. They're designed to demand clarity. They demand autonomy, ethical engagement. That's the goal.
Okay, let's dive in. Let's unpack this, starting with some of the data.
Yeah.
Because Elaine's experience, it's not just some, funny story from a dating app.
No, absolutely not.
It really reflects this massive, measurable generational wave that's changing how people define themselves. Everywhere, really, but maybe especially around sexuality and gender.
The data is frankly dramatic. It's reached critical mass, especially in places like France, actually, where a lot of these linguistic shifts are really being hammered out.
Yeah.
If you look at young women, say, aged 18 to 29, the percentage who don't identify as heterosexual, it has quintupled.
Quintupled. 5 times.
5 times between 2015 and 2023. That's incredibly fast.
Wow. That is a staggering jump. Less than a decade. So what does that demographic look like now, the 18 to 29s?
It means nearly 1 in 5 young women, 19%, now identify as non-heterosexual.
1 in 5.
And for young men in that same age group, the rise is also really steep. It quadrupled over the same period, up to 8%.
Okay, so significant increases across the board for young people. And where is that increase actually concentrated? Because that must point towards why we need this new language.
It points directly there.
Yeah.
The concentration is primarily in identifications like bisexuality and pansexuality.
Right. And this is where those crucial distinctions start to emerge. The ones that might seem subtle but are actually really important.
Exactly. For a lot of people listening, maybe bisexual and pansexual sound, well, pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, attraction to more than one gender, sort of.
Sort of, but there's a really vital philosophical distinction, especially for this younger group using the terms. Bisexuality, historically, it's defined as attraction to both sexes or genders, right? Based on that binary understanding.
Okay.
But when we talk about pansexuality, the definition shifts. It's attraction regardless of gender.
Okay, I think I get the definition, but why is that distinction so necessary? To some people, it might still sound like splitting hairs. What's the philosophical need for pansexual as a separate term?
The key difference, especially as it's often used now, particularly among younger women, is that pansexuality often represents a very conscious, very explicit refusal of the gender binary itself as a necessary reference point for desire.
Ah, okay. So it's not just I'm attracted to men and women, it's gender isn't the organizing principle of my attraction.
Precisely. They're not just expanding the options within the old framework. They're rejecting the fundamental premise that attraction has to be categorized or limited by male-female boxes. It signals a move away from defining desire by who you're attracted to and focusing more on the nature of the attraction itself. A more holistic connection that's specifically decoupled from those rigid gender categories.
That really clarifies the shift. The language becomes a tool to actually dismantle the old assumptions.
Exactly.
And this clarity, this need for specific self-definition, it extends right into gender identity itself. Which brings us back to Elaine's profile and the pronouns, ale, and the whole concept of non-binary.
Precisely. So a non-binary identity fundamentally means a person's gender identity exists outside of or doesn't conform to those exclusive categories of man or woman.
So they might feel like both or neither or somewhere else entirely, maybe fluid.
Exactly. It's a spectrum. And when Elaine saw the pronoun ale, which in French context functions a lot like the singular they, them in English, that pronoun isn't just complication for complication's sake.
Right.
It's an essential linguistic tool. It's designed specifically to acknowledge and respect that non-binary identity. It's basically asking you, the person interacting with them, to use the grammar that actually aligns with their reality, their existential comfort.
And you mentioned earlier, this often overlaps with non-traditional sexual orientations. There's a connection in the data there, too.
The intersections are really significant. The language reflects this reality that, once you step outside the man-woman binary framework for yourself, a lot of the traditional categories of desire might also become less relevant or irrelevant altogether.
Makes sense.
So, for instance, data shows nearly 38.5%, almost 40% of non-binary people identify as pansexual.
Okay, wow. That's a big overlap.
It is. And we also see a rise in identities on the asexual spectrum within this broader shift.
Right. Let's define that clearly, too. The asexual spectrum, and specifically that term Elaine saw, demisexual.
Okay. So, asexual generally means not experiencing sexual attraction to others. And it's crucial to understand this is a sexual orientation, a complete one. It's not about choosing abstinence. It's not a medical issue or a dysfunction.
It's just how someone is wired regarding attraction.
Exactly. Now, demisexual, which is considered part of that broader asexual spectrum, describes someone who only experiences sexual attraction after a deep, significant emotional bond has already been formed.
Okay, so for a demisexual person, you can't just see someone across the room and feel that spark of sexual attraction.
Generally, no. Physical appearance alone isn't the trigger.
The emotional intimacy has to come first. That's the prerequisite. You have to really know them deeply.
Correct. It basically defines the mechanism of their attraction. So you can see why Elaine might be confused if he's coming from a world where initial physical chemistry is often assumed to be the starting point.
Yeah, absolutely.
But again, for the people using these terms, they're not trying to be difficult. They are tools for profound honesty. They set clear expectations right from the very first interaction. Saves a lot of guesswork later, potentially.
Okay, that covers the identity piece. Let's move to the architecture part, the relationship structures themselves. This is the stuff that sounded like a 10-page thesis to Elaine. The base layer seems to be polyamory, and the profile mentioned solo poly.
Right. So polyamory at its core is the practice or the desire for multiple loving, intimate, or affective relationships simultaneously. The absolute key difference from, say, cheating or infidelity is that it's defined by transparency, ethics, and the explicit consent of everyone involved.
Honesty is built in.
It has to be. Now, solo poly is a specific style within that. It describes someone who practices polyamory but sees themselves as their own primary partner, meaning they typically prioritize their own autonomy, often maintain separate living spaces, separate finances, and structure their lives independently while still engaging in potentially deep, committed relationships with multiple people. Their core commitment is to their own independence first.
Okay. And then, to manage these networks of relationships, you need specific words for the connections. The profile mentioned metamor and the other one, polycule.
Yes. Your metamor is simply your partner's partner.
Got it. The person my partner is also dating.
Exactly. You share a connection through that hinge person, your shared partner, but you aren't necessarily dating or emotionally involved with the metamor yourself, though sometimes you might be friends.
And the polycule, Sounds like molecule.
It does. It's basically the entire relationship network, the whole complex web of connections, you, your partner's partners, maybe even their other partners. It's the relationship family, if you will.
Okay, like a family tree, but for relationships.
Kinda, yeah. A dynamic one.
And what about those kitchen table vibes mentioned in the profile? That sounds cozy, domestic. What does it actually mean structurally?
Kitchen table polyamory, or KTP, is a particular style or goal for the architecture of the polycule. It really emphasizes interaction and integration.
Meaning everyone hangs out.
Ideally, yes. The goal is that all the partners and metamors within the polycule can comfortably coexist, interact, even socialize together regularly, like literally sit around the kitchen table together like a big, integrated, extended family.
That sounds like it requires a high degree of comfort and, frankly, emotional maturity from everyone involved.
It absolutely does. It requires much more conscious effort towards group harmony and managing potential jealousies compared to, say, parallel polyamory.
Which is the opposite.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
In parallel polyamory, the different relationships are kept largely separate. Partners know about each other, they're courteous if they meet, but there's no expectation of deep integration or friendship between metamors.
Okay, two very different ways to structure things. And finally, let's quickly define those relationship statuses that seem to live in the gray areas. Things that aren't quite monogamy or aren't quite committed relationships.
Right, you've got monogamish. That term describes a relationship that is, at its core, monogamous, but the couple has explicitly negotiated and agreed upon certain margins or exceptions for external sexual activity under specific conditions.
So, mostly exclusive, but with defined exceptions.
Exactly. Chosen exclusivity, but flexible. Then you have the term that was explicitly ruled out in the profile Elaine saw, situationship.
Ah, yes, no situationships. What is that?
Well, ironically, it's kind of the absence of architecture. It's that murky, undefined space between friendship and romance.
The fog.
The fog is a perfect word for it. It's a relationship where nothing is formally named, defined, or committed to. There are often romantic or sexual elements, but no clarity on expectations, exclusivity, or the future.
And that lack of clarity is probably why the person on the app wanted to avoid it.
Precisely. Situationships often lead to significant confusion, anxiety, and hurt feelings exactly because they avoid the kind of clarity and definition that all these other terms, from aisle to polycule to KPP, are actively trying to achieve.
So what's really clear, listening to all this, is that these terms, they aren't just trendy jargon. They're not designed to make things complex. They're like hyper-specific tools.
Exactly. Tools for communication.
Allowing people to map out their emotional landscape, their sexual landscape, their relationship needs with real precision, which, as I guess we're about to discuss, becomes absolutely essential for actually navigating these relationships successfully.
It's the bedrock. Because when we talk about the rise of these consensual non-monogamous or CNM architectures, we immediately run into this deep, powerful societal conflict, which is the unquestioned dominance of what researchers call mononormativity.
Right. This underlying assumption that monogamy isn't just one option, it's the default setting. It's the invisible, assumed operating system for all romantic and sexual life.
That's it, exactly.
Yeah.
Monogamy is so deeply baked into Western culture. You see it upheld constantly in religious discourse, public narratives, political assumptions, legal structures, that it shapes almost every expectation we have about relationships.
Even if we don't talk about it.
Especially if we don't talk about it. Studies show, for instance, that a huge percentage of people, like over 96%, expect their partner to be sexually exclusive. But get this, only about a third of those couples have ever actually explicitly discussed or agreed upon that expectation.
Wow. So it's just assumed. It's the cultural default.
It is.
Yeah.
And because it's the default, if you consciously choose to opt out of that setting, even if your own relationship structure is ethical, consensual, and loving, you often face this intense social backlash.
Stigma.
A lot of stigma. Research consistently shows that CNM relationships are viewed negatively. When people are asked to evaluate CNM individuals, they consistently rate them as less trusting, less intimate. Their relationships are seen as inherently weaker or less stable.
And the partners themselves are judged too.
Oh, absolutely. Shockingly, sometimes the partners in CNM relationships are perceived as less caring or even less intelligent, simply for choosing to deviate from this one prescribed norm.
Okay, so that's standard stigmatization, right? Labeling people as other, judging their choices. But the research you mentioned before we started, it suggested the stigma can actually escalate beyond that to a level that's, well, frankly, disturbing. Dehumanization.
Yes. This is where the social judgment gets psychologically really unsettling. Dehumanization in this specific research context means denying a particular group the full spectrum of human emotionality.
How did they measure that?
In the studies, participants were more likely to attribute primary, sort of simpler emotions to C&M individuals, things like anger, basic happiness, maybe fear, basic survival stuff.
Okay.
But they perceived them as significantly lacking in complex, secondary, uniquely human emotions.
What kind of uniquely human emotions were being denied?
Things like deep, abiding love, or subtle emotions like embarrassment, tender affection, a profound sense of belonging, nuanced shame or guilt.
Wow. So the implication is that these relationships are somehow too primitive, too selfish, maybe too focused on sex to sustain complex feelings.
That's exactly the underlying assumption. They're effectively denying the capacity for profound, mature, nuanced emotional depth within these intimate relationships.
It sounds like the public belief boils down to, if you can't commit exclusively to one person, you must fundamentally lack the core human capacity for deep commitment and real love altogether.
That is precisely the mechanism that seems to be driving this dehumanization. It's anchored in these deep-seated perceptions of immorality, a lack of commitment to the proper societal script. And what's really fascinating and telling is that this perception, this negative judgment, it overrides almost everything else.
What do you mean?
Well, crucially, this dehumanizing effect held true in the studies whether the C&M couple being evaluated was described as heterosexual or gay.
Oh, interesting. So it wasn't just homophobia layered on top.
No. While homophobia certainly exists and impacts LGBTQ plus polyamorous people, this specific effect seemed primarily driven by the conscious rejection of mononormativity itself. The rejection of emotional and sexual exclusivity seemed to be the most powerful factor triggering the negative judgment.
Okay, so you have this constant social headwind, this intense stigma, even dehumanization. Given all that, it seems absolutely astonishing how sharply this negative public perception contrasts with the actual lived experience reported by people in C&M relationships.
It is a complete dichotomy. It's night and day. When you actually survey C&M individuals about their own relationships, asking about functioning, quality, satisfaction, commitment levels, they consistently report metrics that are not only comparable to their monogamous counterparts, but in some specific areas, particularly things like relational transparency and definitely sexual satisfaction, they often report higher levels than monogamous people.
Higher satisfaction. Okay, why? Is it just, more variety, more sex, or is there something more fundamental about the structure itself?
Well, certainly the freedom to explore diverse aspects of one's sexuality without secrecy or guilt is a factor for many.
Sure.
But researchers often point to other core reasons, like the potential for getting a wider range of needs met through multiple partnerships. Maybe one partner shares your intellectual pursuits, another your adventurous side.
All right. Different people fulfilling different needs.
Exactly. And also the sheer necessity for personal growth. The level of self-awareness, communication skills, and emotional regulation required to successfully maintain multiple honest relationships often forces people to grow in ways that benefit all their connections.
So the structure itself demands skills that tend to lead to healthier relationships overall.
In many ways, yes. C&M structures require constant, active, deliberate choice-making and extremely high levels of communication. And those things, conscious choice, clear communication, are often markers of overall relationship health, regardless of the structure.
That makes sense. And this focus on honesty and explicit agreement, it must also completely redefine what constitutes betrayal or infidelity, right? If sex outside the primary couple, assuming there is one, is consensual, what's considered cheating?
That's a crucial difference. For most C&M individuals, the sexual act itself, if it happens within the bounds of what was agreed upon in their relationship rules or agreements, is rarely the relationship-ending betrayal.
So what is?
It's almost always about breaches of trust and transparency. Things like lying about interactions, withholding important information, breaking explicitly negotiated promises or rules. That's the real infidelity.
So it's about the deceit, not the act.
Precisely. Unlike the mononormative view, which often fixates on the exclusivity of the sexual act itself as the defining line, in C&M, the integrity of the relationship is primarily defined by honesty and adherence to agreements, making deceit, the breaking of trust, the ultimate betrayal.
Okay, so if transparency and honesty are absolutely paramount, it means these relationships demand, well, you called it advanced emotional literacy before.
They really do.
The complexity of navigating feelings, needs, schedules, boundaries with multiple partners, maybe multiple metamors. It means communication isn't just like a helpful skill. It's the absolute foundation. It's necessary for survival, for success.
It's completely non-negotiable. You simply cannot rely on assumptions. You can't just assume your partner knows what you need or feels the same way you do about a potentially tricky emotional situation. Everything, fears, insecurities, joys, logistical needs, has to be brought out into the open and actually processed together.
And we can see this necessity really clearly in that story you shared about Liam and Eva. They're a couple practicing CNM in Berlin.
Yes. So Eva had recently started seeing a new partner, Marcus, and she went away for a weekend trip with him. Liam stayed home.
Okay.
Now, their primary relationship, Liam and Eva's, was strong, secure. They trusted each other. But Liam, alone at home, suddenly got hit with this sharp wave of insecurity. Just a raw pang of jealousy, feeling left out.
Which is totally normal, right?
Yeah, completely human. But the critical moment is what he did next. The traditional, maybe unhealthy scripts might tell him to suppress that jealousy, pretend it's not happening, or maybe worse, get angry and blame Eva for causing it.
Right. Stew on it or lash out.
Instead, Liam recognized the feeling, okay, this is jealousy, this is insecurity. He owned it as his feeling, and he immediately used communication as a proactive tool.
What did he do?
He sent Eva a quick, very honest text message. Something like, hey, thinking of you. Just want to let you know I'm feeling a little insecure and jealous that I'm not with you guys this weekend, but I genuinely hope you're having a wonderful time with Marcus. Missing you.
Wow. That takes some courage and trust.
It does. And Eva, because their communication was strong, she responded almost instantly, with reassurance, with tenderness, affirming their connection, validating his feelings without cutting her trip short.
So that small, honest exchange, it just diffused the whole thing.
Pretty much instantly. Liam didn't make demands. He didn't try to control Eva's experience. He just shared his vulnerability, processed the feeling internally with her support. And because Eva responded with security and care, Liam was actually able to consciously redirect that raw, potentially possessive energy towards the goal of compersion.
Compersion, okay, that's another key term from this world. Let's define that. It's like the opposite of jealousy.
Exactly. Compersion is finding genuine, authentic, even expansive joy in your loved one's happiness, specifically happiness they find with someone else.
So not just being okay with it, but actually feeling good because they're feeling good with another partner.
Yes. It's that cognitive and emotional shift from your connection with them takes something away from me to my partner experiencing joy and connection actually expands the total amount of happiness and well-being in my life, in our network. It's considered the emotional gold standard, really, in ethical non-monogamy.
That sounds difficult to achieve consistently. Is it just luck if you feel it, or are there things that make it more likely?
Oh, it's definitely not just luck. Research suggests it's predictable to some extent, based on the relationship dynamics and individual factors.
Okay, like what? What are the biggest predictors for actually achieving compersion?
Some key factors that seem to boost it are feeling genuine emotional closeness and warmth towards your metamor, actually liking and respecting your partner's other partner, which is something kitchen table polyamory actively encourages.
Right. Easier to feel happy for them if you like them.
Makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Also, having very clear, open, frequent communication about the relationship structure and everyone's feelings is crucial.
Yeah.
And on an individual level, people who manage to cultivate compersion tend to have lower baseline levels of attachment anxiety and general jealousy to begin with.
So it's partly disposition, partly circumstance, and partly skill?
Absolutely. It's a skill. It has to be practiced, nurtured, and reinforced through positive relational experiences and communication.
Okay. So given that CNM relationships demand this high level of emotional maturity and communication skill, it makes sense that they often rely on more formalized tools or frameworks to structure those difficult conversations. You mentioned nonviolent communication, or NVC. How does that work in this context?
NVC is incredibly useful here because its entire purpose is to help people navigate conflict and express deeply felt needs without resorting to blame, criticism, judgment, or demands, which just shut communication down.
Right.
It provides this clear four-step structure like a choreography for handling tough emotional conversations constructively. Let's take a scenario. Imagine Alex has repeatedly canceled plans with their primary partner, Sam, maybe because of scheduling conflicts with a newer partner, a metamor to Sam.
Okay, classic potential conflict point. So what does the bad typical communication look like first?
Bad communication, the blame game, sounds like this. Sam says, you always cancel on me, you clearly prioritize your other relationship way more, and you just don't care about our time together anymore.
Yeah, accusatory, uses always and never, assigns motive. Pretty standard argument fuel.
Exactly. It puts Alex immediately on the defensive. Now, let's apply the NVC framework to the same situation. Step 1 is observation.
Just the facts.
Just the specific factual behaviors stated neutrally without any judgment or interpretation. So Sam might say, the last 2 date nights we had scheduled this month were canceled.
Okay. Undeniable fact. Step 2.
Step 2 is feeling. You express the genuine emotion you're experiencing that's connected to that observation, but crucially, you own it as you're feeling without blaming the other person for causing it. When those date nights were canceled, I felt disappointed. Or maybe I felt disappointed and a little insecure.
Okay. Owning the emotion. Step 3, the need behind it.
Exactly. Step 3 is need. You identify the universal human need that isn't being met, which is driving that feeling. I felt disappointed and insecure because I have a need for quality time together to feel connected and secure in our relationship. This gets to the vulnerable core of the issue beneath the surface complaint.
Right. It's not just about the canceled date. It's about the need for connection. And finally, step 4, the request.
The fourth step is a clear, positive, doable request. Not a demand, but a specific action you're asking the other person to consider to help meet that need. Would you be willing to look at our calendars together right now and schedule a dedicated, protected time for just us within the next week? And maybe we could also talk about how we want to handle potential scheduling conflicts going forward.
So it replaces the vague, accusatory complaint with a concrete, collaborative, forward-looking solution.
Precisely. It moves from conflict to collaboration by focusing on observations, feelings, needs, and requests.
That structured clarity seems vital, and it also feels really important when people are initially defining their relationship structures, especially when drawing the line between what counts as a personal boundary versus a relationship rule. How does that distinction work?
That distinction is absolutely fundamental for maintaining individual autonomy and respect within any relationship structure, but especially in CNM. They sound similar, but they function differently.
Okay.
Boundaries are personal limits that you set for yourself about what you will or won't accept, or what you need to feel safe and respected. They are about your own actions and choices. For example, I need to know beforehand if you plan to spend the night at a partner's house, or I am not comfortable with partners meeting my family at this stage, or I will leave a conversation if voices are raised. It's about protecting your own space and well-being.
So boundaries are about me and what I will do or need. What about rules?
Rules, on the other hand, are negotiated agreements between partners about how they will conduct their relationships.
Yeah.
They govern shared behaviors. Examples might include agreements about safer sex practices with all partners, check-in protocols before dates, agreements about introducing new partners to existing ones, or limits on certain activities.
Okay, so if I say, I need to feel financially secure and informed, that's expressing a need that might lead to a boundary like, I won't merge finances completely. And then if we agree together, okay, so the rule is, we'll maintain separate accounts, but have a transparent discussion about any shared expense over X amount. That's the rule.
Exactly. You've got it. And the most ethically robust relationships, CNM or monogamous, understand that rules aren't set in stone. They must be revisited, discussed, and proactively renegotiated as feelings change, circumstances change, and the relationships evolve.
It's an ongoing process.
Constantly. And perhaps the most damaging thing anyone can do in this context is to subtly or overtly punish a partner for being honest.
What do you mean by punish?
Giving them the silent treatment, withdrawing affection, becoming resentful, or making things difficult practically after they've vulnerably shared difficult feelings like jealousy, or maybe an attraction to someone new or a need to change an agreement. If you punish honesty, you destroy the foundation of trust.
You guarantee they won't be honest next time.
Exactly. You kill the ethical foundation of the relationship. That commitment to compassionate honesty, even when it's hard, is non-negotiable.
Okay. So you have this incredible emphasis on communication, ethics, bespoke architecture. But then this whole way of being runs headlong into the brick wall of the state, right? The legal system.
Absolutely.
In many places, the law just hasn't kept pace at all with these evolving social realities. And it sounds like this disconnect is particularly acute when it comes to family law and identity recognition in France.
It's a major point of friction. The existing legal framework in France, like in many countries, is fundamentally designed to recognize and enforce mononormativity and a strict gender binary.
So it doesn't just ignore other structures, it actively works against them.
Yes, it actively creates what some call structural violence against families and individuals who don't fit that narrow mold. The legal system doesn't just lag behind. In practical terms, it often actively erases legitimate family members and identities.
That story you mentioned about the throuple in Lyon seems like a heartbreaking example of this legal erasure. Can you remind us of the details?
Yes, it involved Anne, Bastien, and Claire. They were a stable, committed, loving polycule. A three-person relationship. They had been together for years, shared a home, finances, everything. Then Anne gave birth to their son, Theo. Bastien was the biological father.
Okay, so Anne is the birth mother, Bastien the bio father.
Huh?
Claire is the third partner in the throuple, also co-parenting.
Exactly. Claire was a full co-parent from day one, involved in pregnancy, birth, night feedings, doctor's appointments, everything. A dedicated parent in every functional sense. The challenge came when they went to register Theo's birth officially.
What happened?
The official French birth registration form is built entirely around the traditional nuclear binary family. It only has space for one mother and one father.
Oh, no.
So Anne signed as the mother, Bastien signed as the father, and Claire. Legally, she couldn't exist on that form. There was no mechanism to recognize her as a parent, despite her actual role in Theo's life.
And the practical consequences of that erasure are huge, right?
Devastatingly so. Because Claire wasn't legally recognized by the state, she lacked all the fundamental rights and responsibilities of a parent. She couldn't legally authorize routine things for Theo at school, couldn't make basic medical decisions if Anne and Bastien weren't present, couldn't automatically pass on inheritance to him without complex and costly legal arrangements. The law effectively rendered a loving, functional parent completely invisible and powerless in key areas.
That's incredibly harsh. And you're saying that same kind of institutional resistance, that erasure, is mirrored in how the French state handles non-binary identity.
Very much so. Despite that clear social shift we talked about earlier, with more people identifying outside the binary, the French state currently does not legally recognize non-binarity on official documents.
So what's the process now if someone is transgender in France and wants to change their legal gender marker? And why isn't that sufficient for non-binary people?
Okay, so since 2016, which was a step forward, changing your legal sex from M to F, or F to M on your civil status documents, requires going through a judicial procedure. Thankfully, they removed the horrific older requirements for surgery or forced sterilization.
That's good.
It is. But you still have to go before a judge and provide proof of your lived identity aligning with the other binary gender. The judge ultimately decides. This process is insufficient for non-binary people for two reasons. One, it forces them into a binary box, M or F, that doesn't fit their identity. And two, the entire judicial gatekeeping process itself has been seriously challenged by recent European law.
Right. You mentioned that landmark European court ruling, the CJUE Deldit decision from 2025. How does that impact gender recognition specifically?
It's a game changer, potentially. The Court of Justice of the European Union, CJUE, delivered a really decisive ruling. It essentially found that conditioning legal gender recognition on medical interventions or invasive judicial procedures that require proving your identity to a third party violates fundamental rights.
Which rights?
Specifically, the right to privacy regarding personal data under the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, and the fundamental right to the integrity of the person. The court basically said the state cannot compel you to undergo medical scrutiny or judicial approval to have your core identity legally recognized.
So the state can't be the gatekeeper of your gender identity in that way.
That's the strong implication. By grounding the argument partly in the right to rectify inaccurate personal data under GDPR, the CJUE decision strongly pushes member states towards systems based on self-declaration or auto-determination. You declare your gender identity, and the state records it.
Which would mean the current French judicial process is legally shaky.
Legally invalid, according to the implications of the Deldit ruling. It puts immense pressure on France and other EU countries with similar systems to revise their laws to allow for much easier, non-medicalized, self-determined rectification of gender markers on official documents. And importantly, it opens the door wider for demanding recognition beyond the binary M and F.
And this legal pressure, combined with activism, has led to an even more fundamental challenge, questioning the need for the sex marker on identity documents at all.
Exactly. There was a significant legislative proposal brought before the French National Assembly, recorded around October 2025, arguing precisely for the complete removal of the sex gender marker from the national ID card.
Just get rid of M or F altogether. What's the argument for that? It sounds radical, maybe.
The argument is actually very pragmatic, based on legal and administrative history. There are two main points. First, history. The sex marker wasn't even present on French national ID cards before 1955.
Oh, really? So it's not some ancient requirement.
Not at all. It was a specific political choice made mid-century. This proves it's not some timeless, absolute legal necessity. Second, and more critically, the proponents argue the marker is simply no longer legally essential in France today, because, at least theoretically and legally, men and women now have equal rights and duties under the law.
So it doesn't serve a necessary administrative function anymore to differentiate rights or responsibilities based on M or F.
Correct. That's the core administrative argument. The marker persists, but its original justifications have largely disappeared with advancements in legal equality.
Yet keeping it, even if administratively redundant, still causes harm.
It causes significant documented institutional harm and violence. For transgender people whose appearance might not match the marker, for non-binary people who fit neither category, for intersex people, having that binary marker on an ID card that conflicts with their lived reality leads directly to routine humiliation, invasive questioning, discrimination in accessing services, and even increased risk of verbal or physical violence during police checks or border crossings.
So removing it eliminates a major source of systemic discrimination.
Yes, it would remove a fundamental tool of institutional othering and align France with progressive recommendations from bodies like the Council of Europe and the UN Independent Expert on Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity. It's a move towards decriminalizing and destigmatizing diverse identities at a very basic bureaucratic level.
Okay, so we have legal frameworks slowly maybe catching up. We have new vocabularies being created. But even if the laws change, even if people learn the acronyms, there's still this deeper challenge, right? Bridging the cultural gap, especially between generations.
Absolutely. This is where the communication breakdown isn't just about misunderstanding a term. It can become a source of profound emotional distance and pain, even within loving families.
That story you told about Alex, who is non-binary, visiting their grandmother, Manon, in Provence, really highlights this, doesn't it?
It really does. Manon adores Alex, completely loves him. But Manon's entire life, her world, her language, her understanding of social reality was built exclusively on a binary foundation. Male, female. That's it.
So Alex tries to explain.
Alex tries, repeatedly, gently. Grand-mère, please just call me Alex. And my pronouns are I'll. They try to explain what non-binary means.
And Manon just...
She fundamentally cannot process the request in a way that feels natural or right to her. She loves Alex dearly, but for her, using I'll, conceptualizing an identity outside of grandson or granddaughter, feels like a linguistic violation almost. An incomprehensible modern complication to a reality she was taught was simple, fixed, God-given perhaps.
So she might push back, even lovingly, saying things like...
Exactly. Things like, oh, but Alex, darling, what am I supposed to call you then? Or it's just too confusing for my old brain. Or maybe she just keeps using the old pronouns and name out of habit, or maybe a kind of passive resistance.
And the tragedy is it's probably not coming from malice. It's this fundamental clash of frameworks.
Precisely. It's an incompatibility at the level of shared cultural and linguistic understanding. But the impact on Alex is still profound. For Alex, Manon's inability or refusal to use their name and pronouns, however wrapped in affection it might be, feels like a constant painful invalidation of their core identity. It creates this real sadness, this distance, where there should just be love.
That intergenerational friction, it really forces us to see that just defining the terms isn't enough, is it? We have to get at the underlying philosophical shift that's driving all this new vocabulary in the first place.
We absolutely do. If we don't grasp that deeper shift, the words will always feel alien or arbitrary.
Okay, so let's try and define that shift clearly. How would you characterize the philosophical foundation of the old way of thinking about love and relationships? The one Elaine's generation, or Manon's, was raised on?
The old view, which is deeply steeped in a certain kind of romanticism and, of course, modern normativity, tended to frame love as, well, the French have a lovely phrase for it, an essence sacrée tombée du ciel.
A sacred essence fallen from the sky.
Exactly. Like it's this external, almost mystical force that just happens to you. It was often tied to ideas of predestination, the one, soulmates, unquestioned permanence, and often a sense of possession or ownership. And it was deeply intertwined with very restrictive traditional gender roles.
And the virtue, the goodness, came from the structure itself.
Largely, yes. The virtue was often seen as residing in the relationship form primarily, lifelong heterosexual monogamy. That form was considered inherently good, righteous, successful, almost regardless of whether the actual internal dynamics were honest, happy, or healthy.
So the relationship was deemed a success simply because it followed the culturally approved script.
Exactly. Adherence to the script was the marker of virtue. Now, the new philosophical view, the one that underpins the rise of C&M, the demand for specific pronouns, the focus on explicit consent, it completely reframes this.
So what's the core of the new view? If love isn't an essence fallen from the sky, what is it?
The emerging view frames love less as an essence and more as a conscious practice. It's something you do actively, intentionally. It's defined by qualities like clarity, mutual responsibility, radical honesty, and ongoing enthusiastic consent.
And the virtue shifts, too.
Completely. The virtue is no longer located in the relationship form. It doesn't matter fundamentally whether you choose monogamy or polyamory or something else. The virtue lies in the style of engagement. Are you being ethical? Are you being transparent? Are you communicating clearly? Are you respecting autonomy? Are you accountable for your impact?
So the crucial thing isn't the structure, but the ethics within the structure.
Precisely. The only thing that truly matters, from this perspective, is being explicit about needs and boundaries,
Right.
taking responsibility for your actions, and ensuring that all interactions are based on continuous, freely given consent.
So the ultimate goal, this whole shift, it's about moving away from what you called a romantisme de possession.
Yes, that romanticism of possession, the idea that love means owning or controlling your partner's time, body, attention, other relationships.
And moving towards an éthique de la relation, an ethics of relating.
Exactly. Is shifting the entire focus from what your relationship looks like on the outside, monogamous, polyamorous, heterosexual, queer, whatever, to how you actually relate to each other on the inside. Are you relating ethically?
Which brings us back to communication.
It always comes back to communication.
Huh.
This is why emotional literacy, the ability to understand and articulate your own feelings and needs and to hear and respect others, becomes the absolute most valuable currency in this evolving social landscape. It's a call for radical honesty and emotional maturity, regardless of the final relationship configuration you choose. The focus is always on defining and living by intentional, mutual agreements, not just falling back on historical defaults or unspoken assumptions. So, just to kind of synthesize our whole deep dive here, this explosion of new vocabulary that might seem bewildering at first, from aisle and demisexual to metamor and compersion, it isn't actually about creating chaos or complexity.
Right, it's the opposite.
It really is. It's a profound collective search for greater honesty and clarity in our intimate lives. These new languages of desire, identity, and relationship architecture are actually powerful tools for better self-knowledge, first and foremost.
Allowing people to define what they need, what they offer, much more precisely.
Exactly. Which, in turn, allows them to potentially suffer less from the pain of unspoken expectations, mismatched desires, or forced conformity, and ultimately to negotiate their intimate lives more effectively, more ethically.
And it feels like the key takeaway then for anyone navigating this, whether you're like Elaine, 62 and baffled by a dating app, or you're 22 and trying to figure out your polycule dynamics, is that success really means prioritizing that emotional literacy we talked about, valuing that skill above just blindly adhering to any old social scripts, whether traditional or even newly emerging ones.
Yes, it means getting good at the grammar of vulnerability, learning how to actually say the hard things clearly and kindly.
Things like, I am feeling jealous right now, or I'm afraid of being left out, or I feel secure. I need this kind of reassurance or boundary.
Exactly. Because the most sophisticated, the most resilient relationship of the 21st century, whether it's monogamous or non-monogamous, is likely the one where that kind of clarity, combined with explicit consent and genuine tenderness, forms the core operating principles.
It might require learning a new language, a new grammar of relating for many of us.
It definitely does for many. But the foundation of connection, of love, of intimacy that remains incredibly strong, maybe even stronger, when those principles of clarity, consent, and care are truly honored. Regardless of how many chairs you happen to have pulled up around your kitchen table,